CNN political analyst and New York Times politics editor Patrick Healy, and attorney and former Mueller colleague Kristan Peters-Hamlin. Kristan, I want to get back to the Russia probe. Thank you both for being with us. You have worked with Mueller, as we just mentioned. Do you see him laying out some kind of roadmap here for us?
In terms of
where his investigation is heading, given the new filings we just saw on Friday and even earlier in the week with Flynn?
Well, quite frankly, I actually thought this was the way it was going for a long time. I think he's been laying this out for those of us who are former prosecutors. It looked like there was going to be FEC violations that were possibly going to be brought against the president. There were going to be obstruction charges potentially brought. Certainly the conspiracy to defraud issues are front and center. And you could even tell at the outset from the prosecutors that he chose to be part of his team that they were people that had significant, deep expertise in money laundering.
Although the president likes to point out that some of them have given money to Democrats. Bob Mueller is a Republican and he's leading the charge, and Rod Rosenstein has been supervising, and he's a Republican as well. The filings that we saw, Patrick, on Friday directly implicate the president in at least one of those filings, the one involving Michael Cohen and the campaign's finance violations. And yet the president here this weekend seems to be taking a victory lap.
Yeah, he's sending a message again to the base that fundamentally the storyline, as he sees it, on collusion with Russia and obstruction of justice hasn't changed. And as we know with this president, especially on Twitter, he likes to make claims that are false or either don't have any backup. But it's very important to him to come out of a day on Friday where you have major filings with both Michael Cohen and Paul Manafort, for the president to basically be able to say, well, okay, there's no smoking gun here on anything, so I'm cleared. That really is not the case. But what is important here is, as you pointed out, the president has now been brought in and implicated directly in alleged crimes in a way that really has not happened before. And what he is being told, at least in terms of it inside the White House, is that, again, yes, you're being pulled into the Cohen money situation with the porn star with the Playboy model, and yet it seems unlikely, like you listen to what Jerry Nadler said on CNN today, that the Congress would take on an impeachment fight over basically money payments that were made when you were a candidate to sort of mask your private life. So I think you're seeing, a real intense spotlight now on the president more, and then I think internally what he's hearing from his people is that it's not that you're off the hook, but that the information that's coming out now isn't, as grave as maybe Democrats might say.
Let's dig into how Congress is reacting and where they might take this, because on one hand, you have Congressman Adam Schiff, a Democrat, who's going to be chairing one of these key committees, saying he's seeing potential jail time for Trump. And then on the other hand, you have Senator Rand Paul, a Republican, saying he completely disagrees. Listen.
My takeaway is there's a very real prospect that on the day Donald Trump leaves office, the Justice Department may indict him, that he may be the first president in quite some time to face the real prospect of jail time.
I'm absolutely against it. I think it's a miscarriage of justice, and we should not have special prosecutors going after one person. And if we get this way, and if we're going to prosecute people and put them in jail for campaign finance violations, we're going to become a banana republic, where they have every president gets prosecuted and everybody gets thrown in jail when they're done with office.
Kristan, do you see the DOJ going after Trump after he's out of office on a campaign finance violation?
I do, and a lot of people say that the campaign finance laws are slapped on the wrist, but they misunderstand the way it works. The way it works with the FEC is that the FEC, it doesn't have the authority to indict. But when the DOJ brings an FEC violation, then if you look at the Senator Edwards situation, that's potentially 30 years jail time. When the Department of Justice brings an FEC violation, you can get very, very long periods of incarceration.
Interesting. And as Jeff Flake pointed out this weekend, though, and you were talking about this, Patrick, that right now, for the time being, it really is what does Congress do? Because the president, according to the DOJ guidelines, would not be indicted
very loyal to Trump. Jeff Flake writing this: "It's like the party is a frog slowly boiling in water, being conditioned to not be worried, to not think too hard about what's happening around them." Patrick, with these new filings, are we going to see Republicans start jumping out of the pond, so to speak?
No, I don't think so. I don't think yet. I mean, you're going to need more serious, I think, really kind of high crimes and manipulation and real, frankly, evidence of either collusion or obstruction of justice. I mean, we were talking for many months about obstruction of justice possibility, for some time, and the Mueller report may still shed light on a great deal. Right now, the report and filings have been so much about the people around President Trump either lying or being implicated in different charges, certainly, but you're not seeing, at least right now, something that I think, to Kristan's point, which is really true, where you're seeing the Justice Department being willing, a Republican Justice Department in this case, being willing to upend conventions and say, we're going to somehow consider an indictment of the president. Even Congress, even some Democrats like Jerry Nadler in Congress, telling CNN today, sort of raising the idea that these offenses might be impeachable. They might be impeachable offenses, but whether the Democrats in Congress want to go into the 2020 election with an impeachment case against Trump, I think you're still hearing a lot of Democrats say, we want to decide this at the ballot box in 2020 unless you see real evidence of high crimes.
And of course, they still have the shadow of what happened with Clinton in the reverse type situation. But Kristan, when the president continues to say this weekend, there is no collusion, clearly, have you seen anything revealed so far, at least publicly, in what Mueller and his team has presented that suggests otherwise?
Well, first, the president also said that he knew nothing about the payments to Stormy Daniels, and that proved not to be true. And I think there's a lot of evidence that the president has a disconnect with the truth a lot. So I wouldn't, his no collusion assertions really aren't very persuasive for me. One of the things that I thought was very persuasive was what I saw with my own eyes and heard with my own ears in Helsinki. To throw under the bus the intelligence agencies of the United States when you're standing next to a former KGB officer and saying that you believe him. And then when the former KGB officer is asked a question by Reuters, did you try to help him win did you want him to win? And did you instruct members of your government to help him? And he said, yes, I did. Yes, I did. And then the very next day, we were all gaslighted as a nation because the president ensured that transcript was redacted of that admission. That's mens rea for me. But I don't think that Bob has, at this point in time, shown his full hand on the issue of the conspiracy to fraud. I think that there's a lot more to come, and he's been getting out in dribs and drabs, but a lot of it's been redacted.
Right.
But I think he'll get there.
Dribs and drabs, some 300 plus pages of dribs and drabs since he has taken over this investigation. Patrick, before I let you guys go, I want to ask you about the chief of staff position and now what we're learning this weekend. Nick Ayers apparently not wanting to take that job, even though he was the front runner for it. And now the name Mark Meadows, the House Freedom Caucus chair, is being thrown out there. What's your reaction to that idea?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, what Trump is going to need are two things. One is a chief of staff who's really going to tell him what he needs to do to be able to compete again in Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin and essentially the states that he put together, Electoral College in 2020. And then he needs a Republican who really can be, chief of staff, who can be the ambassador to the minority Republican leader in the House and to Mitch McConnell in the Senate. Mark Meadows is a member of the Freedom Caucus in the House, the most conservative part of the party. He isn't necessarily known as someone who was flipping, let's say, independents or conservative Democrats in places like Pennsylvania. That hasn't been his expertise. And the reality is that the hard right has sort of driven crazy a little bit people like Mitch McConnell. So President Trump definitely feels comfortable with Meadows. That's very important in a chief of staff. But whether their chemistry, the political chemistry is there with some of the key figures, it's a little hard to tell right now.
All right, Patrick, Kristan, thank you both for being here. Good to see you. Coming up, the invisible primary comes into focus as